The best of downtown from 7 to 8 a.m. on Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket and 929theticket.com. This is the best of downtown.
Well, hello there and a good Sunday morning to you on this 14th day of September. It's the best of downtown, a previously recorded edition of the program. Rich Kimball and Brian Stackpole with you on 92.9 The Ticket and online at 929theticket.com. You can follow the program on Twitter at Downtown Rich K. We're on Facebook, too, Downtown with Rich Kimball. So glad to have you with us this early morning. Got a great show. Going to talk with legendary filmmaker Ken Burns. Also, terrific sports writer and author Dick Crepeau will discuss his new book about the history of the National Football League. Hall of Fame basketball coach Van Chancellor coming up as well. Gary Tanguay from Comcast Sportsnet New England, and a whole lot more. But we kick things off. Our conversation from Friday with filmmaker Ken Burns, who has been producing films for more than 2 decades now, primarily for the Public Broadcasting Network, the great series on the Civil War, the baseball series as well. He's got a brand new series that makes its debut tonight, the first of 7 nights, 14 hours on public broadcasting, all about the Roosevelts, Eleanor, Franklin, and Teddy Roosevelt. The Roosevelts in Intimate History makes its debut tonight, and we talked about that series on Friday with filmmaker Ken Burns.
Indeed. I think this is a story about 3 remarkable people, which strangely enough have never been put together before in film or book. Even though they're all born with the last name Roosevelt, they're all related to one another, even though Franklin and Eleanor get married, they're fifth cousins. But all of them are incredibly talented, incredibly flawed, but also incredibly wounded people who had to figure out a way to escape the specific gravity of their wounds in order to teach other people how that they might do that. They are, as you suggest, to the manner born into privilege, but also had this great social conscience that made them realize that at their particular time, just as we experience today, there was a great disparity between the wealthiest and the middle-income folks, and there was a danger of the middle class disappearing. And they not only dedicated their wealth, but their time and their energy, indeed their lives, to helping improve the lot of all Americans.
Teddy Roosevelt, such a fascinating story for my money, my most fascinating president, and a guy who felt this enormous guilt over his father's inability to serve during the Civil War and channeled that into just this lifetime of, in many ways, overachievement, but also stretching a lot of boundaries. I think it was George Will in the film who says that Teddy Roosevelt viewed the Constitution as a nuisance.
Yeah, well, I think both of them felt that it was more elastic than had heretofore been practiced. But Theodore's mother was an unreconstructed Southerner, and so she convinced her husband, Theodore's father, to buy a substitute from during the Civil War, and Theodore hated that, and it made him very interested in war, very much interested in it, and a little bit recklessly so. He was already a bit unstable and always felt he had to outrun the demons that sort of attended a lot of people in his branch of the family, alcoholism, mental illness, other things. And so I think you see in him this incredible energy, but you also have to temper that appreciation for the energy with a sense that it also was unstable at times.
And Eleanor Roosevelt almost seems in many ways like a bridge between Theodore and Franklin. She grew up really with a very little home life in the sense that there wasn't much of a family connection. She was told that she was ugly, but her favorite uncle, Teddy, really was the one who helped give her confidence and give her some security, set her up for the life that she would lead. And then she was really the conscience that encouraged Franklin to pass some of his most important legislation.
Yeah, she's really a miracle of the human spirit. One couldn't imagine a worse childhood than she had. Her father was an alcoholic and mentally ill and died young. Her mother was aloof, quite a beauty, and hypochondriacal and disappointed in her daughter's look and called her Granny. And, they were both dead before she was 10. She was sent off to pious and grim relatives where there was an abusive nurse and 2 more alcoholic uncles. I mean, she shouldn't have survived this. And in fact, she was the favorite niece, but she did it on her own. She faced fear every day and made a decision to face fear, and did, during her husband's administration, become his conscience. He had to be a much more pragmatic politician. She, not attached, not beholding to constituents, could lead Franklin in the direction of some of the pressing issues of the day. And she seemed to understand what the future would lay with regard to children, women, health, labor, immigration, race, and poverty. And all of these things, she was way, way, way ahead of her time and remains the most consequential First Lady in American history and arguably one of the most consequential women in all of America.
And while Theodore and Franklin were from different political parties, there's some irony there in that much of what FDR passed tied directly to the platform of Teddy Roosevelt's Bull Moose Party in his 1912 run.
Yes, I think one of the reasons why we've not put them all together as the dramatic Downton Abbey, only American and all true, is because we somehow think that because Theodore's a Republican and Franklin's a Democrat, they must be miles apart. They aren't. They're very, very similar. They all believe in helping other people. They all believe that we all do well when we all do well. And in fact, a good deal of what Theodore Roosevelt was frustrated in not being able to accomplish, Franklin was able to accomplish in his administration. In fact, the one thing both of them couldn't do, and Theodore Roosevelt, if he came back, would be shocked that it took us 100 years to do, was health care. It was a platform in the 1912 Bull Moose, and he couldn't get it done because he didn't win. And Franklin, it was a part of the concerns of the New Deal. In some ways, you can see what happened when the Affordable Care Act was passed in 2009, that was really the culmination of both the fair and square deal and the New Deal of Franklin Roosevelt.
We're talking with Ken Burns here on Downtown. The Roosevelts, an Intimate History debuts Sunday night on PBS. Ken, in so many of your films, it seems like one character emerges who really becomes the voice of the story. I think back to Shelby Foote in the Civil War series, Buck O'Neill in the baseball series. Is there a similar person, you think, in this go-around?
Well, there's a wonderful number of commentators in the film, from Doris Kearns Goodwin and David McCullough to John Meacham and Jonathan Alter. My own writer, my principal collaborator for the last 32 years, Jeffrey C. Ward, himself a historian of the early life of Franklin Roosevelt, wrote many of the scripts for our films, the Civil War, baseball, jazz, the Second World War. Not only wrote this the script, but because he contracted polio as a young man, he could empathize so tremendously with Franklin that I decided to put him in front of the camera. And I think some of the most affecting and arresting parts are when Jeff Ward speaks so movingly, not just of what had afflicted Franklin, but clearly what had afflicted him. And he does so, unfortunately, but also fortunately for the rest of us, with the knowledge of first-hand experience. So I think he's pretty wonderful. But remember, as is my style, in addition to the third-person narration that's read expertly by the actor Peter Coyote, we have first-person voices who read Theodore, Franklin, and Eleanor. And we were fortunate enough to get Paul Giamatti to do TR. We got Ed Herman, who's played him many times on the stage and screen and small screen, to do FDR. And we got a little-known actor named Meryl Streep. Pay attention to that name. I think she's going someplace, to voice Eleanor Roosevelt, and she's superb. I've never seen so many people just sort of open their mouths and gape and cry when they suddenly realized they weren't hearing Eleanor, but hearing the finest actor of this or any other generation. Well,
and of course, they're all wonderful in this, and so it makes me wonder, do actors reach out to you when they know that you're working on a new film and say, hey, I would love to be a part of this and help with the narration?
Well, we do things. We live in rural New Hampshire, and we make our films with our nose to the grindstone, and we have to sort of lift our heads up and reach out to the Tom Hankses who've generously read on several of our films, and people like Meryl Streep. They're always really generous with their time. I think they enjoy the time that they do give us. And, all of this is a kind of cooperative effort. It's all on public television so that we don't have investors. We have people who are underwriting, making charitable donations. And we don't get to begin a 7-year project like that without, say, the help of Bank of America, which is our sole corporate client on that. And, I wake up every morning and praise the lucky stars for their enlightened sense that Americans deserve to have a very rich understanding of their past. That helps you be informed citizens. It helps you understand not only where we've been, but where we are and where we're going. So this film is a great collaborative effort on lots of different levels.
Well, it's so fascinating to watch the story of the Roosevelts, and we look at contemporary times and we see two Bushes who've occupied the presidency, one Clinton who has and one who would like to. And I wonder if you think we can ever see the kind of family rise to power like the Roosevelts did a century ago.
Well, it's interesting. Being a fifth cousin, and Theodore and Franklin were fifth cousins, that's awfully long way. I'm a fourth cousin of Abraham Lincoln, and I didn't know that until just a few years ago. So that's a big, huge difference. It's a little bit different than a father and son becoming presidents or a husband and wife becoming president if, in fact, Hillary decides to run. I think Americans who were the original anti-colonialists who threw off, the bold-faced names of royalty and in favor of something more democratic, hadn't really counted on there being kind of families that would stay in office for some time. But I think also there's just familiarity, particularly in a very superficial media culture. We recognize these people. They're sort of proven brand names, to borrow something from business and advertising. And I think that's why. But, from the very beginning of our republic, there were two Adamses and two Harrisons, then two Roosevelts. Many people wanted more than one Kennedy and didn't get one because of assassination and other factors. And, of course, we've had two Bushes and the possibility of a second Clinton.
And that was filmmaker and documentarian Ken Burns, who you talked with us last Friday on Downtown with Rich Kimball about his new series, which will be debuting on PBS on the Roosevelts coming up later this evening. This is the Best of Downtown for the 14th day of September 2014. Glad to have you alongside with us again for this early morning edition of the program. We'll take our first break on the show. When we come back, we'll talk some Boston Red Sox as we wind down the 2014 regular season and the 2014 season as a whole for the Red Sox, and we'll do so with Jason Mastrodonato of the Springfield Republican. That and much more is still to come as we take our first break here on the Best of Downtown, Sports Radio 92.9, The Ticket.
Back on the Best of Downtown. Sunday morning here, 92.9 The Ticket, 929theticket.com. Well, the Red Sox just waiting to get to the offseason to make all kinds of moves and shore themselves up for next year. Dustin Pedroia, successful surgery on Thursday, and now everybody looking ahead. We talked about the future of the team when we had a chance to catch up with Sox beat writer Jason Mastrodonato on Friday.
Yeah, and, I think it's easy for a lot of Red Sox fans to be like, oh, well, we've seen this before, and probably aren't getting their hopes up. But I think the biggest thing with Buchholz right now is that he's about, as close to 100% healthy as he's been in a long time. And everybody knows that when he's healthy, he's pretty good. So if not an elite pitcher in baseball. So when you see Buchholz in the middle of September, and he's at about his full velocity. I think he threw about 92 miles an hour last night. Sometimes he takes it up a little bit higher. And that arm and shoulder are healthy. So to see him healthy in September is a very good sign going into next year.
Also a good game last night from Will Middlebrooks. Is that, though, too little too late for him?
Well, no. I mean, a good game, listen, he'll take it. I mean, it had been since May 1st was the last time he had gotten on base 3 times in a game. So it's a starting point, and he's got about 3 weeks here. And I think these 3 weeks are about as big for Will Middlebrooks as they are for anybody, because if he can get on a little bit of a roll going into the offseason, maybe he plays winter ball and tries to get his swing back in order there. Maybe he just takes the time to rest up and really be healthy. I know I was talking to him the other day, and he feels like he still really hasn't been healthy since 2012, not for an extended period of time. So if he could get things going in the right direction into the offseason, I think that would be really big for him.
Jackie Bradley Jr. back with the team. What is his future with the Red Sox, Jason?
Yeah, that's a good question. Talking to him a little bit yesterday, trying to figure out what he's feeling. It seems like there was a bit of a disconnect in communication between him and the Red Sox and what they were kind of looking for when they sent him down to AAA. And maybe a disconnect from his end where he feels like he didn't need that, but maybe, they wanted to see him there anyway. So right now he's trying to just sort everything out. And in addition to dealing with the outside circumstances and the pressure, he's also got to play baseball. And it's been a tough season for him. There's no doubt. I mean, right now he's probably the number 3 center fielder on the roster. And you start to wonder if he might be better off in a different organization.
by all accounts, Dustin Pedroia's surgery was a success, and I guess the hope is that everything that didn't go well for him this year was tied to that injury in some way.
Yeah, and a lot of people, I think, are quick to kind of write him off and say, well, they got him till 2021, and if this is it, this is going to be not a good situation when you consider he's supposed to be an elite second baseman. And granted, he still is defensively. He's the best in the league statistically and by the eye. But that offense, you do wonder how much of that is tied to his hand injury. And this was happening last year, too. So this is 2 years in a row now where he's played with an injured hand. And you almost think, maybe he shouldn't have played. Maybe he should have just taken the time off and tried to get that thing healthy. But he loves being out there. It's hard to fault him for that. So he's supposed to make a full recovery like he wasn't able to do last year, and he's supposed to be fully healthy going into spring training like he wasn't able to do that last year. So, next year will be a big sign for him to get back on track.
So, Jason, what's it like in Kansas City playing meaningful games in September? Is there a buzz there?
I don't know. I think, the Red Sox are more concerned with what they have to do. I don't think they really care whether the Royals are in it or they're out of it. I think it's nice to see some of their young pitchers maybe in situations where they're going against a team that's fighting, that's really trying to do anything they can to get the runs across. So you could kind of get a good judge of what an Anthony Renato or an Alan Webster or Ruby De La Rosa is going to look like against the contending team in September. So that part, I think, is more what they're concerned about right now. You're not quite seeing that with Renato yet. Maybe Brandon Workman still has some work to do. De La Rosa, though, has been pretty encouraging aside from the last couple of starts. He goes tomorrow, so that's another one to watch, too, to see how he does now that he's at the highest innings total of his career. And
that was Jason Masterdonato of the Springfield Republican and MassLive.com talking a little Red Sox baseball as they wrap up their season here in just another couple short weeks. And we will get into the MLB postseason, which will begin at the beginning of October. Red Sox will not be a participant this year after winning the whole thing last year, but still a lot of great matchups and a lot to look forward to with the Boston Red Sox as we progress into the offseason here shortly. I'll take another break here on this Best of Downtown. When we come back, we'll talk with author Dick Crepeau in his new book about Pete Rozelle and how he was portrayed in that fine piece of literature. So we'll check in with Dick after this break. You're listening to the Best of Downtown here on Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket.
Best of Downtown, a previously recorded edition of the program Sunday morning, September 14th. Good to have you with us. Rich Kimball and Brian Stackpole. Wednesday on our Sports Lit 101 segment with Bruce Pratt. We also had a chance to visit with author Dick Crepeau, terrific sports writer who has a brand new history of the National Football League. We talked about that book with Dick on Wednesday's show, including the portrayal of Pete Rozelle, which is not exactly a rosy one, of the legendary National Football League commissioner.
Well, I suppose he doesn't, and in some ways I think that's unfortunate because he really was, in his own way, was a genius, and he really was one of the major architects of the NFL, and I think he understood public relations, he understood television, and he understood that there were times when you probably had to assert more authority than some people would like. And in order to get things done. And so on the one hand, I think he, to me, he's a genius. And I suppose that when you read the book, you might say, well, maybe he was an evil genius. I think that'd be too strong. I think he was a genius and probably a very, very difficult person to deal with and somebody who was not always totally honest with you.
One of the things, this is Bruce Dick, one of the things I was...
Yeah, hi, Bruce, how you doing?
I'm good, sir. I'm glad to hear your voice on the show. One of the things I found really interesting, and I suppose I should have known this, but was how difficult it was for the players to organize around a union in the NFL compared to the other leagues, and how quickly the owners established the kind of hegemony that they seem to have today. Is it because, in your view, the owners in football are stronger than the owners in the other sports?
I think the owners in football had a history of unity that the owners, say, in other sports maybe didn't have. And if you make the comparison to baseball, I think that becomes clearer. In baseball, individual entrepreneurs who really were cutthroat in their own operations and who saw no need to cooperate with anyone else. In football, in the National Football League, the league went through 25, 30 years of very, very difficult times in which cooperation was essential. Ben Rader years ago made the point about NFL owners that if you look at their backgrounds, they're essentially come from immigrant families, Catholic families, and they're sort of the essential outsider in American life. If you look at baseball owners, they were Protestant, mainline Americans who came out of that 19th century business world. And so there are two different types, and I think the history, the types and the history, both play into this the notion that they were much more unified and much more determined and much better at group combat, let's say, than other owners.
The league also had to overcome the incredible popularity at the time of college football and the belief that somehow going professional might sully this great game.
Yeah, professional was a bad word in America and in American sport for I would guess until probably close to the 50s. And the ideal, the amateur ideal, had always been talked about in American sport. The colleges, of course, still are trying to ride that horse. The NCAA still talks about the amateur ideal. I don't think there are too many people who still worship at that altar. But that was something that had to be dealt with, and eventually it was. And I think in part when people saw NFL players in competition with college players in exhibition games, suddenly they realized that the qualitative difference in the kind of football that was being played, and as they began to get curious about that, watch more NFL football, they were drawn to it, and I think it's still the case. I mean, the college game has its rituals and has its alumni associations, and there's a lot of rah-rah and fun stuff on campus and so on. But if you want high-skilled sport, the NFL is where you go.
Yeah, one of the things I wanted to ask you about, which sort of ties in with that, is that the NFL has become such a brand, as you point out, such a shield. It's sort of we can get ESPN to do its bidding. It can get virtually anybody to do its bidding. Do you think any of that will change as a result of what we've just seen happen in the Ray Rice incident? Or I hate to call it an incident; it's a horror.
Yeah, I don't. I'm not. I think the fallout from the Ray Rice incident is yet to be seen. All of the fallout, and I'm not sure in the end how much how much impact this is going to have. The NFL fan, to a great extent, doesn't care about much of anything except what happens on the field. And once games start being played, people get caught up in that, and these off-field things can rear their ugly head, but they tend to come and go. And even as something as a flashpoint like the Ray Rice case, I would think that unless we keep having more and more things tumble out about it, that this thing will eventually go away. I think it's been very poorly handled by Roger Goodell, and if he holds his job, I think he'll be lucky. Mm-hmm. If I was an owner at this point, I'm not sure I'd be too thrilled with his leadership.
We're talking with Dick Crepeau here on Downtown. He's the author of a new book entitled NFL Football, A History of America's New National Pastime. The media has played a huge role in the Ray Rice story, and the media also played a big role in the growth of the National Football League. It seems inextricably tied to the growth of television in the late 50s and early 60s.
Yeah, I think if you took took a graph, you built a graph, and you said you had one line showing growth of the NFL, another line showing growth of television sets in use in America, they would parallel each other perfectly. This game is really a terrific game for television, and as the technologies of television kept improving, it became more and more of a good television game. I used to talk about this with people before, and I would sit sometimes and I would watch a baseball game, and then I would change channels and watch 10 minutes of a football game, and then I would go back, and I would go back and forth, and it was just so obvious that baseball wasn't meant for television, and football was. That small screen can capture all of the action for you, and then a few replays thrown in, and the best seat at a football game, and unless you're a college fan, I think the best seat at a football game is your living room.
Yeah, I think that's very true. One of the other things that I was interested to learn was that the growth of it, as it relates to the media, had a lot to do with the fact that teams were not allowed to negotiate their own local contracts. That football was going to do the negotiating for them, and that the antitrust.
Bert Bell made that decision first, and then Roselle sort of reinforced it, and then they got the courts and the legal system. And the legislative bodies of government to buy into all that as well.
The decision that hung over Roselle's head really until the day he died was that decision in November of 1963 to continue to play out the NFL schedule on the weekend of the Kennedy assassination.
Yeah, that was a blunder. He was so good at public relations. It's really remarkable that he walked into that one and did not cancel. Everybody else canceled. I mean, the AFL canceled. Most college games were canceled. A lot of public events were canceled. Television programs were all canceled. And yet he thinks the game should go on. Now, there's an explanation for that. I mean, he had an explanation for it, and because he did consult people, friends of his within the Kennedy administration, as to what maybe they ought to do. And probably the key figure in that decision was the press secretary for Kennedy, Pierre Salinger, who was a good friend of Roselle's. And they talked about it before Roselle made that decision. But I think very quickly after making it, he knew it was a mistake. But almost equally quickly, he was forgiven for it. He was still banned. I think it was. I don't remember if it was Time magazine or Sports Illustrated named him Man of the Year that year, like a month after that decision. So, quickly forgiven, even though it was seen as a major blunder.
And that was author Dick Crepeau talking about his new book on the NFL and former Commissioner Pete Rozelle. You're listening to the Best of Downtown here for the 14th day of September 2014. We just talked with Dick Crepeau, of course, Jason Mastrodonato before that, and documentary filmmaker Ken Burns before that. But we still have some great content left to go, including legendary coach Van Chancellor, four-time WNBA champion, Olympic gold medalist, also took some very talented collegiate women's basketball teams deep into the playoffs. We'll talk to Van Chancellor about his career and also what you can expect from the coaching clinic coming up at the University of Maine in just a couple short weeks. You're listening to the Best of Downtown here on Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket.
Here in the early morning hours, thanking the Lord for the nighttime on Downtown. Best of show for Sunday, 14th day of September.
Daytime turns me off and I don't maybe.
Don't forget football coverage. Patriots gets underway. The pregame show, Andy Gretsch, Gary Tanguay at 10 this morning. Kickoff at about 1 o'clock. Bob Sosi, Scott Zolak on the call here on Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket. We were talking basketball on Thursday's show as we had a chance to catch up with a friend of Downtown, Hall of Fame basketball coach Van Chancellor.
Yeah, the Phoenix team reminds me so much of our old Houston Comets team. They got so many good players and some really great superstars, and Diana Taurasi and Brittany Griner. So they got a great team. I think it's the best team since our 1998 team. has been in the league. That's my personal opinion.
Well, Phoenix doing very well. They lead Chicago 2-0 in the finals, and you have Brittany Griner doing it at both ends of the court. Game 1, she was all about blocking the shots and then had a great offensive performance in Game 2.
I think she's the most dominant player our game has seen in a long time. She just can change the game defensively. You know, Bill Russell changed the game for the NBA. This lady's going to change the game defensively. She can just block shots and alter so many offensive shots.
Before we talk about the clinic that you're going to be a part of soon, I did want to ask you, too, about college basketball, which will be getting underway soon. Is there anybody out there that can give Gino Auriemma and UConn a challenge for that national title this year?
I don't really believe so. I just think Gino's just ahead of his time offensively. I just think he's a great offensive coach. He puts them in whatever they need to be in, and they run it. I think there's always a possibility, but I would take Gino and give you the rest of the field right now.
Well, you will be up here on September 21st for what sounds like a wonderful clinic sponsored by Maine's basketball teams, Coach Richard Barron, Coach Bob Walsh, Dean Lockwood from the Tennessee program, and yourself. It's a great opportunity for coaches all over the state and really all over New England to get some terrific insight into coaching.
I try to come in. I think Richard's doing a great job there at the University of Maine. It's such a beautiful place. It's a great vacation. But I'm coming in there to try to share a little bit of the things that have made us successful. And I think it's going to be a great clinic. I think if you're a young coach or any coach, I think you got to come in and learn about the game and get better. I see so many coaches want to run the same offense they've run all their lives because that's what they're comfortable with. I think the secret to coaching is maybe altering your offense to suit your personnel.
Well, the success you had through the years, certainly the game has changed, but what are the things that haven't changed about making someone a successful coach?
I don't think there's any doubt. Making kids feel good about themselves as human beings and as players. I think if I thought I had an asset as a coach, I always thought that I cared about my players as human beings. I think a coach has to love his kids, has to treat them right. And then you have to push them, whether you're a man or a woman. You got to make them better, and you make them better by making the game fun, enjoyable. But at the same time, I think you got to push kids. You got to make them better and make them want to get better.
What's more important from a coach's perspective? Is it the strategy, the X's and O's, or is it that relationship with the players?
I don't think there's any doubt. I think you got to have the right strategy. You can have the best strategy in the world. If you don't have a great relationship with your players, the strategy doesn't matter. In other words, you got to have players who respect what you're doing. They got to respect what you're trying to get them to do, and then they'll then want to play hard for you.
We're talking with legendary coach Van Chancellor here on Downtown. What do you miss most about coaching?
You know, what I really miss more than anything is the great fellowship you have with your teams and other coaches. I miss sitting around and just talking about the game and just visiting. This is one of the reasons I like to do clinics. I like to come in. Richard's a great guy. I enjoy visiting with him. Tracy's on his staff. I enjoy visiting with the whole staff. And I miss that part of it, the dealings with your staff and going to practice every day and just trying to help your players get better. That was one of the things I liked as a pro coach. Even as a pro coach, I had some great players, but I had some wonderful relationships with those players.
Will you be bringing your golf clubs to Maine when you make your way here?
You know, that's the one thing that I have not discussed. I hardly ever go anywhere without my golf clubs. I mean, my golf clubs stay in my car at all times. I tell my family, I don't care what you do, lose anything that I own. Don't you dare lose my golf clubs.
Well, it sounds like a perfect time here in Maine if we can get you some golf, maybe some lobster, and then some basketball. That's just the best of everything.
What a combo. I'm telling you now, the last time I was up there, it's just so beautiful. We went up somewhere and had coffee and off of a mountainside. I mean, it's a gorgeous place up there, man.
And that was legendary basketball coach Van Chancellor from last Thursday's edition of Downtown with Rich Kimball. Of course, Downtown can be heard right here on Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket, weekdays from 4 to 6 p.m. And again, the best of Downtown every single Sunday morning from 7 a.m. to 8 a.m. Again, right here on Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket. We've got to take another break, pay some bills. When we come back on the other side, though, we'll talk a little New England Patriots football with Gary Tanguay, who also had some choice thoughts on Commissioner Roger Goodell. That and much more still left to come on the Best of Downtown here on Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket.
Well, it's Football Sunday, the Best of Downtown, a previously recorded edition of the program. Patriots and Minnesota Vikings going at it. We talked Patriots and more with our friend Gary Tanguay of Comcast Sportsnet New England earlier this week, and we began our conversation with a look back at just how bad the Patriots were in Game 1.
And, no excuses this time around. I mean, I understand Gronk was gassed, but everybody's healthy. Everybody's ready to go. Well, what we did see is that, that offensive line needs work. And Vollmer and Solder, they're the leaders now. I don't care if Conley's the captain, but those bookends have got to step it up. And to me, it's all on them right now, because if you can't keep 12 upright, forget it.
Mm. Well, they're also...
you don't have to be, Belichick to know that.
There were the penalties, 9 penalties, 100 yards, but I dare I use the word with a Bill Belichick coach team, but I thought at times they looked unprepared.
It's true, Rich. And it's, I thought the Chandler Jones penalties were, I know it's a different time. One of the hits, he did get Tannehill in the chin with his helmet. I thought those were kind of close. The Hightower one I thought was unfair, so I think you could take away. Those are 3 penalties right there that I think are questionable. But yeah, you're right. I mean, yes, you're right. The one thing is that there are still some elements of this team that, are new, where you had, Revis was new, and then, you have that safety. McCourty's one safety, but who's the other guy going to be? And the whole offensive line is new, and I don't think we can underplay, that offensive line in all aspects, not only just giving up sacks, but run blocking and, just being together, because that had been such a consistent part of the Patriots game that just isn't there anymore.
So what can be fixed right away without any major personnel changes?
Well, Gretsch talked about it on the postgame show, was go 4-3, go with 2 linebackers, go with a nickel 4-3. So you go 4 down, 2 linebackers, you go 5 defensive backs. That makes some sense because, their linebackers are okay, and there's not a lot of depth. So if you can give a guy a break, like a Hightower or Collins, and you have Mayo out there, and you rotate him in, that might be a way to go. And you play Easley. Easley was the guy, obviously, that made Tommy Kelly expendable. Next week against Adrian Peterson, you better be able to stop the run, else it's going to be a long day.
Yeah, offensively, I thought there were some good signs when he was out there. Danny Amendola looked pretty good. I thought Stephen Ridley looked good yesterday, so it wasn't all bad on the day.
First half, I thought they looked great. They had 2 drives that were textbook. They just sliced and diced their way very methodically down to the end zone. I think one drive was 90-something, another was 80-something yards. I thought they looked fantastic. Even had some runs with Julian Edelman in there, and I said, okay, and away we go. But, boy, lost their composure, and couldn't make a play in the second half. That's what's really, really concerning to me.
Gronk looks a little rusty, but I guess that's to be expected given all the time off.
Yeah, I think so. And the thing about the preseason, Rich, is I don't care what anybody says. I don't think teams are ready to play. Any team. We saw that the first year they went to this light preseason schedule. Mm-hmm. Nobody plays
when they don't hit each other.
Nobody plays in the preseason games, and you can only work out so much. You can only hit so much. So guys aren't ready week 1. And it was obvious he wasn't ready week 1 either.
So Tom Brady decided the problem was apparently the beard and shaved it off today, huh?
Boy, that was one ugly beard. Oh my God, he just something he can't. He looked strange to me. I mean, he looked like I was like, dude, you look a little weird in that beard. You can't pull it off. There's some guys, Luck can pull it off, Favre could pull it off. Brady, no, absolutely.
Well, he's got to decide what he wants it to be. Is it going to be the scruff look, or is it going to be an actual beard?
Well, yeah, I mean, he's the metrosexual dude. I'm sure he gets Giselle gives him some pointers on his look. Probably has a stylist like Dwayne Wade.
Gary Tanguay, Comcast Sportsnet New England, with us here on Downtown. So Minnesota this week, what kind of challenges do they pose? Other than the obvious.
And Matt Castle, obviously, who's familiar with the Patriots. And Norv Turner's the offensive coordinator. Now, Norv isn't the greatest head coach in the world, but he's a damn good offensive coordinator. And we know when Castle has a good coach like he had here in New England, he can be effective. It didn't work out for him in Kansas City. And I can't remember if Charlie was his offensive coordinator that year or not. He might have been. But, I'm a little worried about Castle with Norv Turner and with the running game. Because, that's what killed the Patriots. We could talk about the sacks of Brady, and that's true. But when No-Shot Moreno came in the game, and they couldn't stop him, that was it. To me, that was the key to the game.
Hey, Gary, a bigger picture NFL question. All the news this afternoon on the Ray Rice situation. Is there any way he can come back?
No, and I'm not saying that because the NFL is full of, good people, heartfelt people who are always doing the right thing. He's not any good anymore. His carries per game, his yards per carry were down last year, and he's not worth the headache. But if he was at the peak of his game, sure, he could come back. But he's not worth the headache.
And if it turns out that Roger Goodell saw this video before the 2-game suspension, is his job in any kind of jeopardy?
Well, I think he should be fired if that's the case, and I believe that's the case, Rich. I got an article going up on our website at csnne.com, and, I've had the opportunity to interview Roger. I've always found him to be very nice, kind of a good guy, regular guy, and very engaging. And I think he's done a lot of things right with the league. Some people don't like every move, but overall, I think he's done a good job. But this is inexcusable. Now, the tweet was released by Greg Aiello, the media spokesman for the NFL, that based on the new evidence released today, Roger Goodell is suspending Ray Rice for the year. Well, you can't tell me they didn't see it before. No one buys it. Everybody thinks they're lying, and he should go. This is a cover-up. This is a cover-up, and he should be gone. Absolutely. Richie, it's disgusting. You look at that video. How could anybody in their right mind look at that video and say, 2 games?
No, it's hard to watch.
No wonder he didn't kill her. You look at that video now. This is my opinion. I look at Ray Rice and I say he has the ability to kill her.
Yes. Yeah.
You have a 200-whatever-pound running back and a woman, and he hits her like that. Who knows? It's awful. I don't know how that's the NFL. There's a cover-up going on there. Something's fishy.
And that was Gary Tanguay of Comcast Sportsnet New England and the Patriots Radio Network on the Sports Hub 98.5 FM down in Boston. Again, some choice words for Gary Tanguay on Roger Goodell, who I think his time might be numbered. We'll see how the investigation on the Ray Rice videotape to the league office goes, and we'll keep you updated on that as we progress through the next week and coming days on the Downtown Rich Kimball program. Again, we'll be back in the saddle on Monday, and when we come back from this last break of this show, we'll tell you what's to come on the 15th of September on Downtown. As we'll do that right when we come back from the break. You're listening to Downtown, the Best Of Show, here on Sports Radio 92.9, The Ticket.
About time for us to hustle our way on out of here on a Sunday morning. Thanks to everybody on the show today. Great to have Ken Burns from PBS with us. The Roosevelts makes its debut tonight. Jason Mastrodonato of the Springfield Republican. Author Dick Crepeau. Basketball coach Van Chancellor. Don't forget that basketball coaching clinic at the University of Maine coming up on September 12th, 12 to 6. Just $75 for a chance to get some great information from a number of terrific basketball coaches. Also, of course, Gary Tanguay and Michael Rand filling in on that Patriots and Vikings game that starts with the pregame at 10 o'clock this morning. Don't forget, tomorrow we're back live downtown on the program. We'll break down all the football from the weekend, including the Maine game with Coach Jack Cosgrove. Alan Adams of the Maine Edge will be with us to talk movies. On our Pass the Popcorn segment, we'll play a little more downtown trivia as well. We hope you'll join us. Dale and Clem, the morning pitch at 6 a.m., and we'll see you at 4 for another edition of Downtown tomorrow afternoon on Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket. Enjoy your Sunday.
Downtown, when you've got worries, all the noise and the hurry seems to help, I know. Downtown, just listen to the music of the traffic in the city. Linger on the sidewalk where the neon signs are pretty. How can you lose the much brighter there. You can forget all your troubles, forget all your cares, so go down.